Hi and welcome back. In this video, we're going to be implementing our first Flask application. It's not going to be a very large application, but it's going to give us a taste of how Flask works. Now that we've imported the Flask class here from the Flask module, we're ready to start. The first thing we have to do is to use that class to create our Flask app. And every Flask app must have a unique name. We can do something like app equals Flask and then dunder name. The reason why I'm using dunder name here is just because that's always going to be unique for an application. You know that the file you run has a name of main, and all the other files are going to have different names, so there's no chance of us creating another Flask app with the same name throughout our entire application by mistake. In this project, we're only going to be creating a single Flask app, but you know, this is important anyway. Make sure to have a unique name there. Also, when you are seeing logs and things like that, you may want to see there the name of the Flask app, and it can be helpful to know that this is the main file that you ran. The next thing we want to do is define the first URL of our application. Remember, this is going to be a web application, which means users are going to be accessing this application using their browsers like Google Chrome or Internet Explorer. So the first thing we have to do is say, what happens when somebody arrives at our page? What happens when somebody tells the browser to send us a request for data? What do we do? So the first thing we do is we use a decorator to say app.route, and then we're going to give this / there. The / on any page is always the home page. We're going to see this in action in just a moment. Then we're going to do def home, for example, defining a function. And as you know, this decorator here is going to act on this function here. So the function name doesn't really matter. All that matters is that we've got the right decorator on top. This function is going to run when the user visits this route. And for now, it's just going to return hello world. Okay? So what's going to happen when a user visits our homepage is they're going to be received with the words hello world. The connection goes as follows. The user is going to type our website into their browser, and the browser is going to send us a request. It's going to say, hey, I want the homepage. Then we're going to run this home function, and Flask is going to take care of, communicating with the browser and sending information over the internet and so forth. And at the end, this function is going to return hello world. And that's where we're going to send the browser as data to display on the web page. So the browser is then going to show that to the user, the words hello world. Finally, we have to run our app to start the server that allows Flask to receive connections. The way we're going to do that is, of course, if name is main, so that we only run this when we actually want to run it as opposed to when we import the file, which again, we're not going to do in this section, but nonetheless is something you may want to do in the future. All we do is, apologies by that by the way, app.run debug is true. This starts running our app, and we can give it this debug flag, which is just here for development purposes, but it just means that we're going to get a few more informations if an error happens. So a couple of more bits of information if something does go wrong. We don't foresee anything going wrong with this app, but nonetheless, it's always a good thing to have here when you are developing. Once you share this with your users, you may want to turn this off. Okay, so that's it. This is our first Flask endpoint. Now we can right-click app.py and run it. And as you can see, we get something from Flask. We get that it's running. We get the URL in which it is running, the address. And then, we get some debugging information here because we've used debug is true. This here is the address of the application. When we send a request to this application, it's going to be interacting with this Flask app. When we send the request to this address, it's going to be interacting with this Flask app, and the Flask app can then choose to return some information. Let's go over to Chrome and access this URL. I've accessed the URL here with Chrome, And as you can see, we get the words hello world. I know they're a bit small there. We're going to look at how you can style things much later on. But this is what the application has returned. So going back to PyCharm, you can see that we get some more information now on these logs. We get that on this date, there was a request being made to the home page. This is the protocol used to make the request. It's just a version of, the way that browsers communicate with servers, HTTP 1.1. You can see that this is a GET request. And all that means is a particular type of request. There are various types. We're going to be exploring other types throughout the section. A GET request, which is what a browser sends when they access a page, just asks the server to send some information. It doesn't ask the server to, make changes or add things to a database, things like that. There are other types of requests for that. And then we also see that the code that the server returned is a 200, which means okay, means everything's fine, there were no errors or anything happened that was incorrect. This log here, if you can see that, means that everything's good. Sometimes you may see more than one log, and that's because some browsers do multiple requests for a single page, like Safari can do that sometimes. Don't worry about it. If you can see these logs, even if you see a couple of them, this is good. This means your server is running and we've created our first endpoint. This here is known as a root or an endpoint, and they essentially mean the same thing, and this here is essentially the address of the root. A single /, if we go back to Chrome, just means nothing. But we can access other pages by doing, as you've probably seen in other sites, something like posts or something. So you can see we've got a few test URLs here that I've been accessing already, because what we're going to be creating in this section is a blogging application, so we're going to be looking at various different posts. If you access the URL here with a single / at the end, it's just going to take you to the same page you're already at. And by going back to PyCharm, we can see that there's another log that appeared here. All I wanted to say here is the / is the home page, but we can add roots for other things. Anyway, that's it for this video. I wanted to show you how to go about this, and I'll see you on the next one where we're going to look at some more complex Flask. I'll see you there.